And I was there not on a one-day tour. I was there for 10 days each time. I was there twice already. So each time we were there for 10 days, and we would spend most of the day actually in these locations, doing prayer, doing meditations, doing reflection, and really sensing and seeing, even like chanting out names of those who were killed. It was very, very powerful. But for me, it wasn't just this historic experience that I faced in Auschwitz, which was the shock. It was also to see what is happening now that created a new shock for me. And what I experienced in these death camps, in a modern sense, was busloads of Israeli children that would come. All children in Israel are sponsored a tour by the government to go and visit these sites. And these children would be taken off the buses, and they would have big Israeli flags wrapped around them, and they would get on this railroad track. If you haven't been to Bergenau, you've probably seen Auschwitz list, and you know this railroad track, which is still there. And they would go in on this railroad track singing very patriotic songs, many of them not even understanding what they're going to experience over there. And, you know, joy and singing and walking in, and then they take them on a tour of the chambers and the gas chambers and the bunkers and the lake where they, you know, put the remains of the dead and so on, the ashes and so on. And then you could see how they go in one sense, and they return back with this shock on their faces from what they've experienced. Many of them actually knowing for a fact that their grandparents or great uncles and aunts had been there, had been killed in these areas, in these death camps. And then these children would sit in a circle, all of them with Israeli guides. And they would sit in circles around where we were sitting and doing our prayers and meditation. And then the Israeli guides will begin to speak. And they will begin to explain the story and what happened and give the facts. And then then they'll reach this point where you say, what a tremendous opportunity. And this is when they say, you see what happened to us years ago, 60 years ago by the Nazis? You know what? And in your mind you're praying, this should never happen again to anyone. But of course, this should never happen again to us. And you know what? If given the opportunity, the Arabs, the Muslims, the Palestinians will do the same thing to us as what happened to our grandparents. So this 13-year-old child who has just gone through the shock of his experience does not see this as his history, as his past. They see this as their present and their future. And this I heard day in and day out by almost every single guide that brought these Israeli children. And we have to defend ourselves, and the army is where we do it, and this is why you have to join the army, this is why you have to support the state, this is why Israel was created, to prevent this from happening to us, and we have to be strong to prevent them from doing this to us again. Or again, they mentioned the Arabs, the Palestinians, the Muslims will do this to us again. So for me, I'm imagining this child has just gone through this incredible experience. They come back home to Israel. As you know, when they become 16, 17 years old, they leave high school, they serve in the army. So I'm thinking that even if this was true, what are the tools that are given to the average Israeli to deal with this potential violence and threat? The only tools are the tools of violence. Nonviolence is never taught in Israeli society as an option to dealing with your enemy. We have to be strong, we have to suppress them. This is the only way, this is our only hope. And it is all based on this message of fear. A fear that for me is very real because of the experience that happened, but I would also say that a fear that leaders have also been able to manipulate in order to achieve their agendas. And this is why I say the majority of Israeli society remains silent. Because the moment you become critical of the army, the moment you become critical of the conduct of the army, you're immediately seen, even if it's not verbally spoken, unconsciously you are seen as a Nazi supporter in a sense, that you actually would allow for this future massacre to happen to us. So the only tools are given are the tools of violence. The Israeli military is it. This is where our hope is. It's only in the military. It's only in being strong. And then the soldier, at 18 years old, is given a machine gun, thrown at a checkpoint inside the West Bank, and in a sense is told, deal with it. Deal with this new threat. Deal with this new Nazi. And I've had, these are the images I had when I was there, and I started seeing, how does an Israeli soldier sees me at a checkpoint? How does an Israeli soldier sees me, even if it's not in his mentality or his conscious on the spot, but unconsciously he grows up seeing me as this potential threat to them, and this is a big reason why he engages in these activities towards me. And again, I don't justify it or excuse it, but for me it's going to that root. And then understanding what are the things that I need to do now as a Palestinian who is seen with that lens from the Israeli soldier. So it's even not just about now my rights, it's not just about my justice, it's not just about my freedom, my liberation of the occupation, from the occupation. The question now becomes, what are the issues that I, as a non-violent activist, even before being a Palestinian, how am I responsible to the Israeli himself? What are the issues that I have to address in the Israeli? And for me, again, it goes into this issue of fear. The world has completely ignored and neglected the fear that has become inherent in Israeli society. Germany and the Europeans and the Americans thinking by giving billions of dollars to Israel every year, by giving them political mandate to do whatever they want, including things like what happened today that we saw on the news, then that takes the guilt trip away from us. And by taking the guilt trip away, then we don't have to feel bad and Israel can do whatever it wants. And this way we don't feel bad about the Holocaust, and in a sense we're dealing with it. Money's not going to heal, and giving political superiority for Israel to do whatever it wants is not going to heal the Jewish people from the Holocaust. And this is where I challenge many Palestinians. I say, you know what, it's up to us. I mean, I think, as I would say that Palestinians are the closest thing to the Israeli Jewish community that can actually engage in actions and activities to provide this opportunity for healing. Even if we don't engage in healing, but the opportunity comes from how we conduct ourselves. What are the words that come out of our mouth? What are the actions that we take? Even when we talk about nonviolence now. And this is a big challenge. As we are seeing nonviolence grow in Palestine, and we're seeing leaders adopt nonviolence, and we're seeing the Palestinian president and the prime minister take on nonviolence, more than any time before, we as an organization want to even challenge this much further and say we are also responsible for what is happening on the Israeli side as well. Because any political solution now without addressing the issue of fear within Israeli society will not last. It might be a temporary ceasefire, 5 years, 10 years. But immediately we'll go back into more violence after that. And each time the round of violence is worse than the round before. So even a two-state solution now, for me, without addressing that issue, is a non-solution. A one-state solution now without addressing that issue is a non-solution. And when we talk about non-violence, it becomes now this issue when I am in a non-violent protest, when I'm engaging in a non-violent action against the wall or against a settlement. For me, it becomes important to have this recording in the back of my mind going, this is how the soldier sees me. And then my conduct and my activity is not where it's just about my rights in engaging in nonviolence in order to get what is justly mine, but then I would engage in the words and actions that will also allow for him an opportunity to see me not as that potential threat to him anymore, but as a fellow human being. And that becomes again more difficult. But I think this is where we need to be moving. So nonviolence is a crazy thing, and we, it's been very challenging for us. But what we are learning as an organization is, as I said, we could stay where we are now at the shallow level of talking about nonviolence, and it sounds good and it sounds nice, but unless we go deep on the Palestinian side and on the Israeli side, just dig our roots deeper and deeper, then we will not find any solution.